So when we start with the closed circulatory system, even in closed circulatory system, it is different in different organisms. I mean the heart, which is the main pumping organ of the circulatory system, it looks different in different organisms. So let us start with the closed circulatory system of fishes. Let us see what kind of a circulatory system do fishes have. So fishes have two-chambered heart. What do we mean by two-chambered heart? So normally this pumping organ, that is heart, it is divided into chambers, or it is divided into room-like structures. So fishes have two chambers inside the heart. So what are these two chambers? The two chambers are called auricles and ventricles. So the fish's heart has one auricle and one ventricle. So what is auricle and what is ventricle, and why at all the heart is divided into chambers? The heart is divided into chambers in order to keep things more organized. So these auricles are the receiving chambers. That means the chamber which will receive blood. Ventricle is the chamber which will pump the blood. That means ventricle will release out the blood and auricle will receive the blood. Now I'll give you a small memory tip here to remember that which is the receiving chamber and which is the pumping chamber. So AIR, that is air, right? So AIR means auricle is receiving chamber. Similarly, VIP, that is ventricle is pumping chamber. So with like this you can remember that auricles are the receiving chambers and ventricles are the pumping chambers. So blood enters into the auricles and blood goes out from the ventricle. So in order to keep the incoming blood and the outgoing blood separate, the heart has been separated into two different types of chamber. So now, how the blood flow or how this transportation take place in case of fishes. Now before that, which is the organ which is present in fishes which is used for gaseous exchange? That means which is the respiratory organ in fishes? They do not have lungs, right? They have organs called gills. We have already spoken about gills in one of the previous slides. So what will happen here? So let us suppose, so I'll make a block diagram here. So these are the gills of the fishes. So what is the function of the gills? To absorb oxygen from water, because they are aquatic animals. So they will absorb oxygen from which is dissolved in water. So the gills will absorb this oxygen. Now what will the gills do? Now the blood, this oxygen will get dissolved in the blood. How? Inside the gills also, like how inside the lungs we saw that the oxygen which enters the lungs, it reaches the alveoli, then it is transferred to the capillaries. So that is how, in similar way, this oxygen which is absorbed by the gills, this oxygen is also passed to the blood. So now the blood is rich in oxygen. So this blood is known as oxygenated blood. What is oxygenated blood? Blood which is rich in oxygen. And what is deoxygenated blood? Deoxygenated blood is poor in oxygen. Poor in oxygen, or we can say it is rich in carbon dioxide. So till now we were talking about air, right? We were telling that good air contains lot of oxygen and bad air contains lot of carbon dioxide. Similarly, now we are going to talk about blood, because during transportation, whether it is oxygen or carbon dioxide, they get dissolved in blood. So the blood which is rich in oxygen, we say that is oxygenated blood. And the blood which is rich in carbon dioxide or which is poor in oxygen is called deoxygenated blood. So now once the gills absorb the oxygen, what kind of blood will come out of the gills? It will be oxygenated blood, because it will have more of oxygen. So this is the good blood. So where will the good blood go? This good blood will go to the different parts of the body. So this is oxygenated blood. So this oxygenated blood from the gills will go to the different parts of the body. Correct? Now from in the different parts of the body, the process of respiration will take place. The cellular respiration will take place in each cell, and as a result carbon dioxide will be produced. Now each cell will want to get rid of that extra carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide will be sent back to the blood. So now the blood which will come from the body, the blood which is coming back from different parts of the body, that is rich in carbon dioxide. So that is deoxygenated blood. So let me denote the dotted line for deoxygenated blood. So deoxygenated blood will come out from the different parts of the body. So where will this blood go? Now this blood will go to the heart. Let us suppose this is the heart of the fish. So this deoxygenated blood will go to the heart. Where it will go? Now the heart is divided into two chambers, that is auricle and ventricle. Auricle is the receiving chamber, so it will receive the deoxygenated blood. Then the auricle will pass this deoxygenated blood into the ventricles, and then the ventricles will pass them to the gills again. So what will the gills do? The gills will again send the carbon dioxide to outside. So gills will send the carbon dioxide outside, and it will take in the oxygen, and again it will send oxygenated blood. So you can, in one way, you can think of it like this, that gills are the organs which are actually converting deoxygenated blood into oxygenated blood. If you see here, deoxygenated blood is entering into the gills and oxygenated blood is coming out of the gills, right? I'm sorry, this should have been a dotted line. This is a dotted line. By mistake, I drew it a straight line. This is actually deoxygenated blood, right? So this is how the blood circulation takes place in case of fishes. Now the question is, now I already explained you why the heart is divided into chambers, to keep things segregated so that the blood coming in is kept separated from the blood going out. Also here we see that there is not much separation between the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood. So if you see here, I mean, there is not much separation. So here the deoxygenated blood is going in, going out. Then that same blood is again becoming oxygenated. So it is like that. Now fishes are cold-blooded animals. Therefore, they do not need any extra energy for their maintenance of their temperature. So here blood leaves the gills and immediately circulate to the body. Therefore, we do not need to add more chambers than two. That is why heart has only two chambers here. So these are the organisms which have least number of chambers in the heart. As we go ahead with reptiles, amphibians, they have 3-chambered heart. When we go ahead with human beings, they have 4-chambered heart. The fishes have only 2-chambered heart, because in this case we see that as soon as the blood comes out from the gills, it is immediately circulated to the body. So it doesn't go anywhere else for any other process. So that is why we do not really need much additional chambers. So that is why fishes have only 2-chambered heart. So it is clear how the circulation takes place in case of fishes. Let us now see another important thing, that here only one time, it was just once that in one cycle of circulation the blood passed through the heart. So this is one cycle of circulation, and in one cycle the blood passed through the heart only once. That is why this is known as single circulation. Amphibians and the reptiles, as I just mentioned, they have 3-chambered heart. So what are the 3 chambers? Now they have 2 auricles and 1 ventricle. Earlier we had 1 auricle and 1 ventricle, but now we have 2 receiving chambers. Auricles are the receiving chambers, right? That is left auricle and right auricle, which are abbreviated as LA and right and RA. In case of amphibians, we have double circulation. So let us look at how circulation takes place in case of amphibians and reptiles. Let us suppose here we denote the different body parts. Which is the respiratory organ in case of amphibians and reptiles? They have lungs. So let us suppose this is the lungs, this is the body, and let us suppose this is the heart. Now here the heart is divided into 3 chambers. So there are 2 auricles. So let us suppose this is right auricle, this is left auricle, and this is the ventricle. So this is how the heart looks like in case of amphibians and reptiles. This is the lungs. So what is the purpose of lungs? Lungs will take in oxygen from outside. So the blood which will be coming out from the lungs, that will be the oxygenated blood. So where does this oxygenated blood go? The oxygenated blood goes to the left auricle. So this is the oxygenated blood. Now left auricle is the receiving chamber, so it received the oxygenated blood. Now this oxygenated blood then needs to be passed to which chamber, so that if you want to send it outside, the auricle should send it to the ventricle. So it will send it to the ventricle. What will the ventricle do? The ventricle will send the oxygenated blood to the different parts of the body. So the oxygenated blood comes from lungs to the heart, and from heart it goes to the body. But in case of fishes, we saw that the oxygenated blood directly came from gills and it directly went to different body parts. But here it will come via heart. Now in the body, it will reach each and every cell. So once oxygen reaches each and every cell, cellular respiration will take place. So carbon dioxide will be released in each cell. This carbon dioxide will get mixed with the blood. So the blood coming out from different parts of the body will be the deoxygenated blood. So this deoxygenated blood will then reach the right auricle of the heart, because auricle is again the receiving chamber, so it will receive the deoxygenated blood. It will send the deoxygenated blood to the ventricle, and the ventricle will send this deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. So what will the lungs do with this deoxygenated blood? The lungs will take out carbon dioxide from the blood and throw it outside. The carbon dioxide will be thrown outside, and when oxygen is taken in, again the oxygenated blood is sent to the left auricle. So what do you see here? This complete thing which you see on the screen, this is one cycle of circulation. That is oxygenated blood from lungs to different parts of the body, deoxygenated blood from body to different part to lungs. So in this entire cycle, the blood crossed heart 2 times, right? Once when this oxygenated blood crossed the left auricle and ventricle, again when the deoxygenated blood crossed the right auricle and the ventricle. So that is why this is known as double circulation, because the blood passes through the heart twice during one cycle of circulation. Clear? Now again, one memory tip here is, sometimes people get confused that which blood is oxygenated and which blood is deoxygenated. Always remember, oxygenated, the name itself says, the blood which is rich in oxygen. Deoxygenated, the blood which is poor in oxygen, that is the bad blood which is rich in carbon dioxide. Now this oxygenated blood will always come from lungs to the left auricle. L for lungs, L for left auricle. So L for lungs, L for left auricle. So from lungs, the blood will come to the left auricles, because auricles will always be the receiving chamber. So every time blood should come inside the auricles and blood should go out from the ventricles. Clear? Now which blood will come to the left auricle? L for left auricle, L for lungs. So the blood from the lungs should come to the left auricle. What kind of blood will come from the lungs? Because lungs take in oxygen from outside. So the blood which will come from the lungs has to be oxygenated blood. Clear? So it is very to remember it this way. So oxygenated blood from lungs comes to left auricle, auricle will send it to ventricle, ventricle will send it outside to different body parts. In body parts, cellular respiration will happen, carbon dioxide will be produced as a byproduct. So this carbon dioxide will get mixed with the blood and the blood will become deoxygenated. So the deoxygenated blood will go to the right auricle, it will send it to the ventricle, and the ventricle will send it back to the lungs. Now another question is, what makes the blood flow from auricles to ventricles? Why does the blood flow? I mean, once the blood reaches the auricle, how does the blood know that it has to flow from auricle to ventricle? The blood has a very high pressure. Since the blood is enclosed inside blood vessels, therefore the blood has a good high pressure, and because of this pressure the blood is made to flow from auricles to ventricles. So now in this case you have seen that now what is the advantage you feel when you have 3 chambers? I mean, why did they separate the auricles into 2 separate chambers, a left auricle and right auricle? Because once we have segregated the auricles into 2 separate chambers, we have actually segregated the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So here you can see that left auricle will always deal with the oxygenated blood and right auricle will always deal with the deoxygenated blood. There will be no mixing at all. Whereas since there is one ventricle, therefore this same ventricle deals with the deoxygenated blood and the same ventricle also deals with the oxygenated blood. So by introducing a third chamber, the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is controlled to some extent, because we do not want the good blood and the bad blood to get mixed up together, right? So by introducing a third chamber, the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood are separated to some extent in the auricles. Now there is one exception who has a four-chambered heart, and that is crocodile. Crocodile is reptile which does not have a three-chambered heart. Instead, they have a four-chambered heart like human beings. So we will talk about the four-chambered heart in the next slide. So let us look at the kind of heart which we human beings have. So how does a four-chambered heart function, and what are the advantages of having a four-chambered heart? So what happens in case of human beings? They have a four-chambered heart. So what are the four chambers? Two auricles and two ventricles. So I guess now you can understand why another ventricle is added here, so that the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood now can be completely separated both in auricles as well as ventricles. So this prevents mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So here also we have double circulation. So let us try to understand how we have a double circulation here. So let us suppose this is the body and these are the lungs, and somewhere here we have the heart, which is divided into four chambers. So this is the right auricle, this is the left auricle, and this is the right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle. Right? So the auricles are the one which will receive blood, AIR. Auricles are the receiving chambers, ventricles are the pumping chambers, that is VIP. So this lungs will take in oxygen from outside. So the blood which will come out of the lungs, that will be oxygenated blood. Where will the oxygenated blood go? L for lungs, L for left auricle. So the oxygenated blood will go to the left auricle. From left auricle, this blood will go into the left ventricle, and the left ventricle will send this oxygenated blood to different parts of the body. Right? Now again in body, cellular respiration will happen, carbon dioxide will be released. So deoxygenated blood from the body will come into the right auricle. So this is the deoxygenated blood. From right auricle, it will come inside the right ventricle, and the right ventricle will send it back to the lungs. Right? So here also you see that in one complete cycle, once this oxygenated blood passed the heart, and then the deoxygenated blood again passed the heart. So in one cycle, the blood passes the heart 2 times. So that is why this is also known as double circulation. So in this case, the blood is enclosed in vessels. Because of that, the blood is at a higher pressure. Now, higher rate of the oxygenated blood flow enables birds and mammals maintain high activity levels. As I said, the warm-blooded animals, that is birds and mammals, they need some extra energy to maintain their body temperature. Now, the high rate of flow of the oxygenated blood actually helps them to maintain their body temperature. And that is why in case of warm-blooded animals, we do not want that the oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood gets mixed together. And that is why this separation is done, and therefore they have 4-chambered heart. So if you look at the circulatory system in this fashion, here you can see the red lines actually denote in your textbooks, or mostly a convention is followed where the red lines denote the oxygenated blood. Red denotes the oxygenated blood and blue denotes the deoxygenated blood. So here you can see that the oxygenated blood comes from the lungs, it goes to the heart, and from heart it goes to different parts of the body. We can see the red lines everywhere. Similarly, the blue lines start from the different parts of the body. They come to the heart, and from heart they are again pumped back to the lungs. So you can see they are pumped back to the lungs. From lungs they will be thrown out through the nostrils. Right? So this is how oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is circulated throughout the body of an organism. So height of oxygen rich blood flow actually enables the mammals and birds to maintain high activity levels. So now that we have spoken about, so we have roughly got an idea about how the blood circulation takes place in human beings. But in human circulatory system, other than just the flow, there are many other things which are involved. The most important thing is the blood vessels. What is the significance of the blood vessels? Why do we enclose blood in blood vessels? And what are the different types of blood vessels? So basically we will talk about three types of blood vessels: arteries, veins and capillaries. So we will see why do we have these three types of vessels and what do they actually do. So now looking at the picture which I shown you in the previous slide, how the circulation takes place, there has to be some carrier which will actually carry the oxygenated blood or who will actually carry the deoxygenated blood. So those carriers are nothing but these blood vessels. So let us start our discussion with arteries. Arteries carry blood from heart to different body parts. So from heart, whichever blood flows out, that is carried by the arteries. They always carry oxygenated blood. Now in order to understand this, let us quickly plot the same diagram because it will help you to understand it in a better way. So this is the body, this is the lungs and this is the heart which has 4 chambers. This is the right auricle, this is the left auricle, this is right ventricle and this is left ventricle. So what did we see? We saw that the oxygenated blood from lungs comes to the left auricle, then it goes to the left ventricle, from left ventricle it goes to the different parts of the body. And the deoxygenated blood from the body comes into the right auricle, from right auricle it goes into the right ventricle, from right ventricle it goes back to the lungs. So this is the oxygenated blood and this is the deoxygenated blood. So this is how the circulation happens. Now who is actually going to carry these oxygenated blood from lungs to the left auricle or this deoxygenated blood from right ventricle to lungs? Who is actually going to carry them? They are going to be carried by the blood vessels. So artery is the one which carries the blood from heart to different body parts. So if you see from heart to different body parts, this oxygenated blood goes from heart to different body parts. So this blood is always oxygenated. So the blood which goes from heart to the body. So this is the only blood which is going from heart to the body and it is oxygenated. Therefore the arteries will carry this oxygenated blood. So this oxygenated blood is carried by the arteries from heart to different body parts. They have thick elastic walls. Why do they have thick walls? Because blood flows from the heart, which is a pump. Therefore, the blood flows under very high pressure. So they should have thick walls. If they have very thin walls, due to the very high pressure of the blood, the walls may rupture and the blood vessel can also get damaged. So that is why they have very thick walls, because the blood which is flowing through them is coming from the pump. There is one exception to the artery, that is pulmonary artery. There is a pulmonary artery which carries deoxygenated blood from right ventricle to lungs. So this is an exception. All arteries will carry oxygenated blood and all arteries will carry blood from heart to different body parts. The only exception is pulmonary artery. It will carry deoxygenated blood from right ventricle to lungs. So if you see the deoxygenated blood from right ventricle to the lungs, this is the deoxygenated blood from right ventricle to lungs and this is carried by the pulmonary artery. See, in the previous definition I told that arteries carry blood from heart to different body parts. So from heart to different body parts, but lung is also a part of the body. But to the lungs, from heart to lungs, the blood which is getting carried is deoxygenated. So this deoxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary artery. That means all arteries will carry oxygenated blood from heart to lungs. Only pulmonary artery will carry deoxygenated blood from heart to lungs. So if you remember this block diagram of circulation, it will be very easy for you to remember things. So now you understand what are arteries? Okay. Let us now talk about veins. What are veins? They carry blood from different parts of the body to heart. So the same picture, if I draw it here, if this is the body, this is the heart with 4 chambers, that is right auricle, right ventricle and left ventricle. and this is the lungs. So the lungs will send in oxygenated blood here, right? Left auricle will send it to left ventricle, and left ventricle will send it to different parts of the body. Now from body, deoxygenated blood will come to the right auricle. Right auricle will send it to right ventricle, and right ventricle will send it to different parts of the body. This is the deoxygenated blood. So in the previous slide, we saw that this oxygenated blood from heart to body is carried by the arteries. This deoxygenated blood from heart to lungs is carried by the pulmonary artery. Now veins will carry blood from different body parts to heart. That means different body parts to heart. So this is going to carry deoxygenated blood. So these veins are going to carry deoxygenated blood. They have thin elastic walls. Why do we have thin elastic walls? Because in this case the blood is not flowing from the pump. The blood is flowing from different parts of the body, so they are comparatively at a lower pressure. As a result, thin walls will also do. In veins, there are valves which are present. What are valves? Valves are something that regulates or controls the flow of a fluid. So valves actually regulates the flow of a fluid. So you can consider valve as doors. Like why do we have doors in our houses? So that the doors can control the entry and exit of people. When the door is open, people are allowed to enter. When the door is closed, people are not allowed to enter. So we can decide as per our own choice whether we want people to enter in or we do not want them to enter. So similarly, there are valves which can be opened or which can be closed. So when the valves are closed, blood flow cannot take place. But when the valves are open, blood flow will take place. So inside the veins, valves are present. Why are valves present? In order to prevent the backflow of deoxygenated blood. See, because this is deoxygenated blood, which is a bad blood. We do not want it to be inside our body. So we do not want that this deoxygenated blood by any chance starts flowing back. Because in case of the oxygenated blood, it was flowing from the heart. So it was flowing under very high pressure. So there is no chance of it flowing back. But in this case, the blood is flowing at relatively lesser pressure. So there are chances that the deoxygenated blood might flow back. So in order to prevent the backflow of deoxygenated blood, there are valves present inside the veins. So if you keep the valves closed, there is no chance that the blood can flow in the backward direction. So even for the veins, there is an exception, that is pulmonary vein. Like all veins carry deoxygenated blood, but pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left auricle. That means this is done by the pulmonary vein. So whenever somebody asks you what is artery, artery are those blood vessels which carry oxygenated blood. Only exception is pulmonary artery, which carries deoxygenated blood. Similarly, veins are those blood vessels which carry deoxygenated blood. Exception is pulmonary vein, which carry oxygenated blood. Clear? Okay. So let us look at the third blood vessel, that is the capillaries. Now the arteries which we are talking about, these arteries branch out to form smaller tube-like structures known as arterioles. These arterioles further branch out to form even thinner structures called capillaries. And these capillaries are the thinnest, they are the smallest blood vessel. They will again join together to form venules, which in turn will join together to form veins, and the veins will join together to form vena cava. So here you can look at this picture. This is an artery, this red line. Why is it red in color? Because the arteries carry oxygenated blood. The oxygenated blood is denoted by red. Now if you see here, the arteries branch out to form the arterioles. So here you can see so many arterioles, right? Now these arterioles will further branch out to form the capillaries. So here you can see very thin tube-like structures. These are the capillaries. Now the capillaries again join together to form the venules. So here you can see the capillaries again come back and join together and form venule. Venules again form a vein. So this is the vein, the blue structure. And many such veins join together to form vena cava. So this is how the structure of blood vessels are. Right? So the capillaries have extremely thin walls. Why? Because capillaries are the main sites for exchange of gases. As I have already mentioned, in case of respiration also, the main exchange of gases take place between the alveoli and the capillaries. That is why alveoli have extremely thin walls and the capillaries also have extremely thin walls, so that the diffusion can take place easily. The exchange of gases, nutrients or excretory products, everything become easier if the walls are thin. Right? So we covered the different blood vessels, arteries, veins and capillaries. Let us now quickly differentiate between the arteries and veins. Both of them are blood vessels, but when we talk of arteries, they carry blood from heart to the body, whereas for veins, they carry it just the opposite, from different parts of the body to the heart. Arteries carry oxygenated blood except one artery, which is pulmonary artery, which carries deoxygenated blood. All veins carry deoxygenated blood except one, that is pulmonary vein. In arteries, blood flow with higher pressure. Why? Because arteries carry blood from heart to different parts of the body, and heart is the pump. So it is actually carrying blood from the pump. So the blood is at a higher pressure. So the flow is with higher pressure. In veins, the blood flow with comparatively lower pressure. Because of this difference in pressure, the arteries have thick elastic walls, because since the blood is flowing with very high pressure, so the vessel inside which the blood is flowing should be strong enough. Otherwise, the vessel might rupture. So they are provided with thick elastic walls, whereas the veins are provided with thin, less elastic walls. In arteries, there are no valves, because since here again since the blood is flowing with higher pressure, so there are less chances that the blood will flow in the backward direction. Whereas in case of veins, valves are present, because since the blood is flowing with a comparatively lower pressure, so there are chances that it might backflow. So in order to prevent that backflow, valves are present inside veins. So these are some of the important differences between arteries. So with this, we will conclude our discussion on the blood vessels, and we will now discuss in detail about the human heart. Heart, which is the pumping organ of the circulatory system. Let us look in detail the structure of the heart. So it is the muscular pumping organ. It is located in the thoracic cavity between the lungs. So in the respiratory system, we saw that there are two lungs which lie in the thoracic cavity. Somewhere in the middle of the two lungs is present the heart, which is slightly tilted towards the left. So if you look here, you can see that the bottom of the heart is slightly tilted towards this side. The size of the heart is approximately the size of a human fist. So if you make a punch with your hand, you can just get an idea about the size of the human heart. Weight of the heart is around 300 grams. You can get an idea about how much 300 grams is. The heart beats around 100,000 times a day, which is too much, right? Now we have got another important word here. The heart beats. Why does the heart beat? We all know that the heart beats. But what is the reason that the heart beats? Because so far we saw that, okay, the blood flows through the heart regulates or controls the flow of blood from lungs to the different parts of the body. But what makes the heart beat? So let us try to understand the cause behind the beating of the heart. So before that, we need to have a clear understanding regarding the structure of the heart. What all does the heart consist of? Let us try to understand the structure of the human heart. As I mentioned before also, it consists of 4 chambers, that is 2 auricles and 2 ventricles. The auricles are the receiving chambers. The memory being AIR, auricle is receiving, and the ventricles are the pumping chambers, that is VIP, ventricle is pumping. Right, so here in this picture you can see the structure of the heart. This is the right auricle. Sometimes the auricles are also known as atrium. So atrium is another term for auricle. So this is the right auricle, this is the left auricle, this is the right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle. Now the auricles are separated from the ventricles by coronary sulcus. So there is a groove-like structure between the auricles and the ventricles, and that is known as the coronary sulcus. Similarly, how are the auricles separated from each other? The left auricle and the right auricle are separated from each other by interauricular septum. So this interauricular septum actually separates the right auricle and the left auricle. Similarly, there is an interventricular septum which separates the left ventricle from the right ventricle. Now these four chambers need to be separated from each other, right? So auricles and ventricles are separated by a groove-like structure called coronary sulcus. The two auricles are separated from each other by interauricular septum, and the two ventricles are separated from each other by interventricular septum. Now, when we talk about the structure of the human heart, it becomes very important to talk about the valves. It is not only the four chambers which is present inside the heart. Other than the four chambers, there are four valves as well, which play a very important role inside the heart. So what are these valves? These valves are nothing but they are regulators which control the flow of blood inside the heart. So these valves actually decide when will the blood flow from the auricle to the ventricle, when the blood should not flow from the auricles to ventricles. So the flow of blood is completely decided by these valves. So each valve opens one way and controls the flow of blood. So the valves will open and close, and their opening and closing will actually allow the blood to flow. So what are the four valves which are present? The first one is pulmonary valve. The name pulmonary valve came from the pulmonary artery. So it is present between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. So here if you see, this is the right ventricle, right? And where is the pulmonary artery? This is the pulmonary artery. So do you remember the structure which I explained? Let us try to understand this with the same structure. That will help you to understand it in a better way. Let us suppose this is the heart divided into the four chambers. This is the right auricle, right ventricle, and left ventricle. This is the lungs, and these are the different parts of the body. So from the lungs, oxygenated blood comes to left auricle. From there it goes to left ventricle. From left ventricle it goes to different parts of the body. From different body parts, the deoxygenated blood comes to right auricle. From there it goes to the right ventricle, and from right ventricle it goes back to the lungs. Right? So now from this pulmonary valve is present between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. So you see here, from right ventricle to the lungs, this is deoxygenated blood, and this deoxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary artery. So somewhere here we have the pulmonary artery. So the right ventricle should be connected to the pulmonary artery. So now if you look at this picture, this is the right ventricle and this is the pulmonary artery, the purple colored structure. So you see the right ventricle is attached to the pulmonary artery, and in between them there is this pulmonary valve. Clear? So this is one valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. Which is the next valve? It is the tricuspid valve, which is present between the right auricle and right ventricle. So here you see in this deoxygenated flow, the flow of blood also took place from right auricle to right ventricle. So here also there should be a valve present. So between the right auricle and the right ventricle, this is the right auricle, this is the right ventricle. In between them, this valve is present, which is called the tricuspid valve. Why is it called tricuspid? Tri means three, because it has three cusps. What are cusps? Cusps means nothing but flap. So these kind of valves have three flaps, so they are called tricuspid valve. So it is present between right auricle and right ventricle. Then the next one is the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. Bicuspid would mean that it has two cusps or two flaps. It is present between left auricle and left ventricle, that is left auricle and left ventricle. Here one valve has to be present, because if you look at this picture, you can see that the blood from the lungs to the left auricle, this is the oxygenated blood, and who carries this oxygenated blood? Pulmonary vein. right? Now this blood which flows to the body, that is carried by the arteries, and this blood, deoxygenated blood which flows from the body to the right auricle, that is carried by the veins. So that means these are the gateways where actually the flow of blood has to be controlled. The flow from right auricle to right ventricle, the flow from left auricle to left ventricle, and also the flow from the pulmonary vein to left auricle, and the flow from pulmonary artery and the right ventricle. So we have valves at these 4 places. So now this bicuspid valve is present between left auricle and left ventricle. This is left auricle, this is left ventricle. So between them is present the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. So the cuspid valves are present between the auricles and the ventricles. So between the right auricle and right ventricle, the tricuspid valve is present. Between right auricle and right ventricle is tricuspid valve, that is RTR. And between left auricle and left ventricle is the bicuspid valve, that is LBL. So this is how you can remember it, RTR and LBL. So RTR means right auricle, tricuspid valve, right ventricle. So in between the 2 right auricles and ventricles is the tricuspid valve. Similarly, between left auricle and left ventricle is the bicuspid valve, which is the 4th valve, that is the aortic valve. The word aortic has come from the term aorta. What is aorta? Aorta is the largest artery in the body. Aorta is the largest artery of the body. So between the aorta and the left ventricle is present the aortic valve. That means this left ventricle and the aorta. So here also one valve has to be present. So wherever the outflow of blood takes place, there has to be a valve present there. Because see, in this case, the blood is inflowing, the blood is entering into the heart. So we do not need a valve. Again, in this case, into the left auricle, the blood is inflowing into the heart. So we do not need a valve. But in this case, if you see from right auricle, it is going out into the right ventricle. So we need a valve. Again, from left auricle to left ventricle, it is going out. So we need a valve. From right ventricle, it is going out to the lungs. So we need a valve. Again, from left ventricle, it is going out to the body. So we again need a valve. So this valve is known as aortic valve. So if you see here, between the right ventricle, between the left ventricle and the aorta, which is the aorta, this is the aorta, the red colored structure, which is the largest artery. So if you see, it is connected to the left ventricle, and this is known as the aortic valve. So these 4 valves together control the flow of blood inside the heart. So let us now try to understand the functioning of the human heart. We have understood the circulatory system inside the human body as a whole, that how blood flows inside a human body. But now what we are trying to understand is, what is the cause of the beating of the heart? Why does the heart beat? What is that thing which happens inside the heart which makes it beat? Now, as I said, the heart consists of the auricles and the ventricles, the right and left auricle and the right and left ventricle. So here what happens, the auricles and the ventricles, they have muscular walls, because of which those muscles can contract and relax. Now this contraction and relaxation of the auricles and ventricles actually lead to the beating of the heart. Now why does the auricles and the ventricles relax or contract? Let us have a look. Now here also you see this blue color will represent the deoxygenated blood and the red color will represent the oxygenated blood. Let us try to understand the process stepwise. The first step is the auricles receive blood. As I said, auricles are the receiving chamber, so they will always receive blood. Now while receiving blood, the auricles will remain in relaxed state, because whenever any object receives something, that doesn't contract. For example, in case of lungs also we saw that when we breathe in, the lungs expand, they do not contract. Similarly, when the auricles receive blood, the auricles will be in a relaxed state, because during receiving blood, more space is needed by the incoming blood. So the auricles relax. So the relaxation state is known as diastole. the term diastole is used for the relaxation state. So this relaxing state of the auricles is referred to as auricular diastole. So when does this happen? Now here you can see that the blood is entering into the auricles. So the auricles are in a relaxing state. Clear? Now the auricles, that is the left auricle and the right auricle, contract. Now once the auricles have received blood, so initially the auricles were relaxing. Now both the auricles have received blood. The left auricle received the oxygenated blood from lungs and the right auricles received the deoxygenated blood from different body parts. Now both the auricles have received blood. Now once they have received blood, the auricles contract and the bicuspid and tricuspid valve opens. So where do we have the bicuspid and tricuspid? Let us suppose this is the right auricle, this is the left auricle, this is the right ventricle and this is the left ventricle. So between right auricle and right ventricle we have the tricuspid valve. So this is my tricuspid valve. We said RTR. Between right auricle and right ventricle we have tricuspid valve. Between left auricle and left ventricle we have the bicuspid valve. So now once both the auricles are filled with blood, they have received blood. So once they have received blood, what happens? The tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve, these two valves open. Now what will happen if this valve opens? This blood will start flowing from right auricle to right ventricle, right? And after that, this valve will close. So the blood will remain in the right ventricle. Now similarly, when this valve will also open, what will happen? Blood will flow from the left auricle to the left ventricle, and once the blood flows into the left ventricle, this will get closed. Now when the blood flows out of something, that object will contract, right? Like when the auricles were receiving blood, they were relaxing. Similarly, when the auricles are sending blood, they will contract. So that is why in step 2 what happens? Both the auricles contract, bicuspid and tricuspid valve opens. So what happens to the blood flow? Blood flows from right auricle to right ventricle. Blood also flows from left auricle to left ventricle. So that means this blood flow will happen and this blood flow will also happen. So this is my second step. So that means at the end of the second step, what is happening? All the blood is there in the ventricles. All blood is collected in the left ventricle and the right ventricle. So now when the ventricles were receiving blood, so the ventricles were also relaxing. So that means in this stage, when the auricles are contracting, what do we say? We say this is auricular systole. Systole is used for contraction and the word diastole is used for relaxation. So when the auricles contract, that is called auricular systole. But at the same time, in the same step, when the blood is flowing from the right auricle to right ventricle, what is happening to the ventricles? The ventricles are actually relaxing because the ventricles are getting blood. So this is also known as ventricular diastole because the ventricles are actually relaxing while receiving blood from the auricles. Now in the next step, what happens? The ventricles contract because now the ventricles are filled with blood and the bicuspid and the tricuspid valve closes. So that means all the blood gets collected in the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Okay. Now what happens? The pulmonary and aortic valve opens. That means where is the pulmonary valve? This is the pulmonary valve. This is pulmonary valve and this is aortic valve. Because this is connected to the aorta. This is the aorta. And what is this? This is the pulmonary artery. Right? Now these two valves will open. Now what will happen if this valve opens? The blood which was collected here in the right ventricle, it will start flowing out through the pulmonary artery. So something like this will happen. This valve will open and therefore the blood will flow out from the pulmonary artery. Correct? So the blood flow from right ventricle to the lungs and also from left ventricles to the body. So you saw the movement of blood, how this deoxygenated blood which came to the right auricle, This was deoxygenated blood. It was coming from the different body parts. So this came into the right auricle. When the blood was entering right auricle, their auricles were relaxing. Once it got filled with blood, it started contracting and this valve opened. So the blood entered into right ventricle. When the blood was entering into right ventricle, the ventricles were relaxing, which is called the ventricular diastole. Once the ventricle was filled with blood, this valve opens and the blood flows into pulmonary artery. And then the ventricles contract, and this is called ventricular systole. Now the similar things happens also in the left auricle. So that also you can see from this animation. Now the blood first enters into left auricle. When this valve opens, it flows from left auricle to left ventricle. Now the bicuspid valve closes. And what happens to the ventricles? The ventricles will now start contracting because it is filled with blood. And now the aortic valve opens. When the aortic valve opens, this blood flows to the aorta. So through aorta, where does it go? It goes to the different parts of the body, because the aorta will actually take it to different body parts. So it will go back to different parts of the body. Clear? And what does this show? This shows nothing but the lungs. So now you can understand this diagram. What does it say? From different parts of the body, deoxygenated blood comes. It goes to the right auricle. From there, it goes to right ventricle. From right ventricle, it goes through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. In the lungs, the deoxygenated blood, the carbon dioxide is thrown outside the body through nostrils, and the oxygenated blood is passed to the left auricle. From left auricle, it goes to left ventricle. Then it goes through the aorta to different parts of the body. So I hope that now you understood the entire process. So in this entire process, did you observe one thing? That at periodic intervals of time, the auricles and the ventricles keep contracting and expanding. And this contraction and relaxation is actually interpreted as heartbeat. This contraction and relaxation gives rise to the beating of the heart. So here you can observe the same process once again. The deoxygenated blood flowing from right auricles to the ventricles, and then through the pulmonary valve goes out to the lungs, where similarly the oxygenated blood from the lungs enters from left auricle to the left ventricle through the bicuspid valve, and then when the aortic valve opens, it moves through the aorta to different parts